So mindfulness in education is relatively new. We could say that in a sort of obvious way it's been around for almost a decade, but barely. And what I've noticed about this movement of mindfulness in education is that, well, the groundwork was there because of John's work in MBSR and everybody else that followed in those footsteps, and also the work in education that's been done around social emotional learning. But what I've noticed about the movement of mindfulness in education, if we can call it that at this point, is that the interest is mind-blowing. The enthusiasm is overwhelming in a different way than I think it is in the other fields of mindfulness in corporations, mindfulness in medicine. And I think it's because it's about kids. So I'm assuming that all of you have had some exposure to mindfulness as a personal practice. How many of you found it as an adult? And right, most people. That was most hands. And for those of you that found it as an adult, how many of you had the thought, probably really close to learning your first introduction, I wish I had had this when I was younger? Right, most hands. And then how many of you had the next thought, which is, we should get this to kids? Right. So that's where this movement is generating from. And because of mindfulness being present in all these secular applications prior to it, there's this field of people that are ready to participate in it. And it's beautiful. And when I encounter the people that are interested in this field, as you can imagine, like the people you're meeting today, it's just a bunch of good people, a bunch of lovely, gentle, kind-hearted, well-intentioned people. And it's been an absolute delight to be part of it. And I see this movement as really at its infancy in many ways. And the enthusiasm, although inspiring, is also there's a kind of cautionary tale that I hold with it, because we're working with kids. And so what I've realized over the last 6 years with Mindful Schools, we thought we were teaching people how to teach mindfulness to kids. And each training would go by and we'd start emphasizing more the importance of personal practice. And then I just started realizing that all we're teaching people is the importance of personal practice. And so Mindful Schools has evolved sort of its emphasis. We started out 6 years ago providing direct services in schools, where our instructors would go into the classrooms, and we created these 15-minute modules where we would teach students basically one application of mindfulness per visit. And we teach them mindful breathing, mindful listening, mindful seeing, mindful movement, mindful eating, mindfulness on the playground, and we had these components that we were calling heartfulness, which are along the lines of compassion, empathy, acceptance, kindness to self and others. And there's a great advantage of having sort of an expert come in from the outside, because they're coming in embodied. And they're demonstrating what mindfulness is by the way they're being. And yet, there's this huge sort of devouring interest in spreading mindfulness for youth, and so we had to start teaching the adults. And both the adults that were interested in being a direct service provider, but also the adults that were already in the environment with students. And so you come to this embodiment piece. And my biggest concern has been, what if mindfulness gets misappropriated as a disciplinary tool? Well, and indeed it does. You know, we're playing this balance, but if you bring a program into a school that, at least initially, if not for the whole course, creates a really still, present, relaxing, peaceful classroom for 15 minutes, it's really easy as the teacher to latch onto that as the thing that will make them shut up. And so we give teachers classroom bells, mindfulness bells, so that they can lead their own mindfulness class. And occasionally you see the teacher picking up the bell and ding, 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 ding. And it's the uncompassionate request to be quiet. So with this growing movement, our work these days is really emphasizing the personal practice. And I think one of the reasons mindfulness in education is becoming so popular is kind of for obvious reasons. I mean, the traditional educational model we can all pretty much agree is broken. And despite that fact, and despite my own, or although I have my own sort of passion about what education can be, mindful schools didn't start with the intention to transform the educational system. And it's still not our intention. Our intention was to provide this basic fundamental human capacity to young people. And the easiest place to reach them is in schools. So there is this parallel thing happening where mindfulness in education is growing, and there's a huge conversation around education itself. And I do feel that mindfulness might start to influence education from the inside as young people start to look at their education differently based on what they're learning through mindfulness, and what the teachers might be noticing about the way they want to be different, and administrators that are coming in and the way they want to do things differently. So I do see this influence of mindfulness in education, but it's not our purpose right now. Our purpose is to find ways to effectively and skillfully maintaining the integrity and the quality of these programs to give people access to them because of the demand out there. So we've had a magical 6 years of being in classrooms and getting to work with like 20,000 kids in more than 50 schools in the Bay Area. And you've heard a lot from the researchers, and I'm not a researcher, so I'm gonna leave that all to them and tell you more the heartfelt anecdotal stories. The evidence to me of what these programs are doing is evident, is tangible the first day in the classroom. 99% of the time, the first lesson ends in a pin drop silence classroom. And it's a kind of silence that most of them have not encountered before. So what we're giving them really is this stopping. It's the permission to stop. To stop the constant defense mode or safety analysis mode, or the constant intake of outside stimulus, the constant need to respond to the stimulus, even to give them a temporary stopping from learning. Just the rest and digest side. That because education is so focused on academics to the point where teachers are scheduled minute to minute, and they don't schedule in resting, digesting. They don't schedule in stopping. And so when you give them permission to do something that they hadn't been given permission to do in that environment, there's this immediate sense of relief. And honestly, that's the word that I would use in that first class about what it feels like in the classroom and what I see on their faces is relief. Kind of this like revelation of, I can feel that way. And it's not this in-depth, profound self-analysis, self-awareness that we as adults are sort of all hungry for. It's the stopping. And I think both Paul and Kristen both kind of mentioned that the stopping that then allows a certain degree of self-awareness to come up is what allows the compassion to arise. To me, mindfulness and compassion are inextricable. That a real moment of mindfulness has the essence of compassion or kindness, gentleness in it. it's like if you are just mindful of an emotion without the kindness behind it, it usually you don't connect with it. So compassion is sort of this glue that brings you into the moment and lets it drop in a real, substantial way. And of course, you don't have to tell kids any of this. When you give them the environment to stop, things just start to happen naturally, and they'll share these stories about how they're using mindfulness, and you can always hear the thread of compassion in it. We've worked a lot in inner city Oakland, and often there's lockdowns. If there's violence in the neighborhood of the school gets a lockdown, and it means the students have to stay in their classroom until everything is taken care of. And I've had actually a handful of stories from teachers when this has happened at school, and there's a certain amount of fear that comes up with it, even though there's also a certain amount of normalcy, which is so sad. But that the kids are asking the teachers to practice mindfulness. And specifically, they're asking for a lesson that we call sending kind thoughts. And they're considering the people that are involved in the violence outside of their classroom, and that's where their thoughts are going. Can we send kind thoughts to the people that got hurt? Completely self-motivated. And then we've got stories of kids being on the playground. The wrap-up is where all this goes. So the enthusiasm for this, because of the recognition of the value that this can provide for the next generation. So it's such a valid enthusiasm. And it's all of our jobs to make sure that this rapid growth, because it's sort of out of our control, is coming from a place of really deep embodiment. There can be a broad reach for this work, but there also has to be a deep reach. And I invite you all to follow the movement in general and to support it and participate in whatever way you want so that we can see this next generation of kids be the reflection of what's been happening for the last 30 years in this secular world of mindfulness. Thank you.